German U-boat U-530, Mysterious Voyage. The German submarine U-530 vanished from Allied tracking in early May of 1945, and when she reappeared 66 days later in an Argentine naval port, the crew had a story so thin that intelligence officers assumed they were lying. The official account was that the U-boat had been wandering the Atlantic aimlessly, just waiting for orders from a government that no longer existed. But the submarine's torpedoes were gone. Her deck gun was missing, and local fishermen reported seeing equipment thrown overboard just before she entered the harbor. What followed was one of the most scrutinized naval surrenders of the Second World War. The FBI, British naval intelligence, and Argentine authorities all wanted the same answer. Where had U-530 been, and what, or who, had she been carrying? The popular speculation would later fill libraries with theories about escaped Nazi leadership, Antarctic bases, and buried gold. But, the declassified files suggest a different explanation. One that says less about grand conspiracy and more about the quiet, desperate choices of men who had outlasted the war they were built to fight. This is the story of a U-boat that took her secret to the bottom, and what the search for that secret reveals about the final, undignified end of the Kriegsmarine. U-530 was commissioned in February 1944, a moment when the German submarine force was already in retreat. She was a long-range Type 1C-40, designed for operations as distant as the Indian Ocean and the South American coast. A boat built for a war that was by then largely unwinnable. Her first combat patrol began in February of 1945 under the command of Oberleutnant Otto Wehrmuth, who was a 29-year-old officer with no prior wartime command experience. The patrol was meant to be a standard anti-shipping mission in the Atlantic, but honestly, the Atlantic in early 1945 was no place for a U-boat. The crew were young men in dark uniforms, facing challenges they could hardly have imagined. On May 8, 1945, while U-530 was about 1,200 miles east of the American coast, the crew received the news that Germany had surrendered unconditionally. The war was, over, but no one had told them where to go or what to do with their submarine. Wehrmuth convened his officers. The ports of Norway and the United Kingdom were controlled by the Allies. A U-boat surrendering there would mean internment, interrogations, and an uncertain future. But there was another option. Run south, try to evade Allied patrols, and attempt to surrender in a neutral nation with a long history of welcoming German immigrants. They chose Argentina. The journey required 66 days of submerged running, surfacing only at night to recharge batteries. The crew was rationing food. The diesel engines were running on borrowed time. And, every day brought the risk of detection by Allied naval forces still sweeping the Atlantic for U-boats that hadn't yet surrendered. What the conspiracy narratives rarely acknowledge is the physical condition of the boat and her crew. A Type 1C/40 was designed for patrols of about 70 days. U-530 had been at sea since February. By July, the men were living in diesel-fouled air, sleeping in bunks that hadn't been properly aired in weeks, and navigating without reliable communication from any command authority. Before entering Argentine waters, Wehrmuth ordered the jettison of all sensitive equipment. The deck gun was unbolted and pushed overboard. The remaining torpedoes were fired into the sea. The Enigma encryption machine was disassembled and dumped. Codebooks, charts, and operational logs followed. On July 10, 1945, U-530 sailed into Mar del Plata and signaled her surrender. The Argentine Navy took the crew into custody. Within hours, American and British intelligence officers arrived to begin interrogations. The interrogations lasted for months. The Allies wanted to know if U-530 had transported Nazi leaders. Martin Bormann was a frequent speculation, or if she had offloaded gold or artwork somewhere along the South American coast. The crew maintained their story. They had been aimlessly waiting, and they had dumped equipment to prevent it from falling into Allied hands. What the intelligence files eventually revealed was that U-530 was not unique. Several U-boats made similar voyages to Argentina and other South American ports in the summer of 1945. The pattern suggests not a coordinated escape network, but, well, a simple calculus. South America was neutral, far from the ruins of Europe, and offered a chance to delay the inevitable. The United States Navy took possession of U-530, used her for target practice, and sank her off the coast of Massachusetts in 1947. The crew was released by Argentine authorities after 10 months, and most eventually returned to Germany. No evidence of Nazi leadership's stolen gold or Antarctic bases was ever found. The great mystery of U-530, it turns out, was largely a product of the post-war imagination, a vacuum that conspiracy theories rushed to fill because, honestly, the mundane truth seemed insufficient. The real story of U-530 matters because it sits at the intersection of military collapse and human decision-making. When a regime falls, the men who served it are left to make choices without orders, without guidance, and often without any good options. Understanding those choices requires setting aside the myth and looking at the men themselves. Subscribe to War Machiner and share this if you value history that goes deeper.